Welcome to the Digileaders session on bringing the joy and body language back to Zoom meetings. I'm going to run through some slides with you today, and then we'll have a question and answer session at the end. And this is really all about how you can make your online meetings much more productive, much more engaging, and much better for well-being. So I'll now move to screen share. So there's a number of things we're going to cover in today's session. I'm going to talk about a kind of unified theory of Zoom fatigue. So a vicious circle that I've seen dominate many Zoom meetings, and a way to counter that using hand signals. And we'll start using this hand signal straight away. So I just want to check, can everybody hear me? So if you can hear me, give me a big thumbs up. Thank you, that's great. I can see that you're all there and you're with me today. So I'm going to talk about a number of hand signals you can use in meetings that can help break that vicious circle. I'm going to talk about some case studies, and we'll show a bit of a video from a client session that we've done with the Green WI, and some of the neuroscience behind what we're doing, and some work we've begun with UCL on a randomized controlled trial of the hand signals with groups of students that gives some scientific backing to this approach. And finally, we'll actually do some interactive sections as well. So I'll teach you some of the hand signals, then we'll get a chance to use those during the session and also at the Q&A at the end. Okay, so how did this all come about? Well, it's really because, like many of you, I found when I went into lockdown last March that I was in lots of Zoom meetings and team meetings, and I use the word Zoom to apply to any kind of video meeting. And many of them just weren't that great. They were to some degree, and some were even quite dysfunctional. People weren't engaging. And I started to put a research hat on and talk to people about the meetings and just ask them their views on what did they think? What did they think about that meeting? How did they feel? How did they find it? And I started to get very, very common reactions. So a lot of people would say to me, I find it very hard to read the body language. So again, if you're watching this and you like that point, then give me the thumbs up. If you were to give me now this hand signal, that means me too. That means I also find it hard to read the body language. And people are saying to me that sometimes when I'm presenting, I just feel like I'm staring at a sea of blank faces. And that just makes me feel bad. And it just makes me feel uncomfortable, and I don't really enjoy being a leader in those kind of meetings. By the way, if you're wanting to send someone some sympathy, then the hand signal would be a hand to a heart. So if you do that, then and somebody's sharing something with you that's perhaps a little bit more emotional or not such good news, then hand to heart means I hear you and I send you some positive thoughts on that. So hard to read the body language, getting a sea of blank faces, not knowing when to speak next. So a lot of people finding I don't really know when it's my go. And I don't like interrupting, especially people who are perhaps a bit more shy, a little bit more introverted. They then found they perhaps withdrew a bit more, and the conversation was dominated by people who did want to speak more, and the share of voice wasn't really shared around. The meeting didn't feel so inclusive. And people also started to multitask. And I'm slightly embarrassed to admit that on this picture, there are examples of some of the things I've rather naughtily done during other people's Zoom meetings. So again, if any of you, oh yeah, I noticed one or two me too hand signals there as well. You do admit, as many people did, that they were in back-to-back meetings. The meetings were starting on the hour, ending on the hour, no time to do anything else. And because they weren't getting much of a reaction from others in the meeting, they would just switch off a bit, and sometimes even also switch their videos off, or perhaps just more minimize their Zoom screen. That people realized they could minimize the Zoom screen. They could appear to still be in the meeting when they weren't really in the meeting because they were doing other stuff. They were catching up on emails or shopping on eBay or looking at the cricket score or communicating with their family. And again, I'm ashamed to admit I've done that. But I found I wasn't the only one. Lots of people were doing this. We were almost kind of colluding in substandard meetings. The meetings weren't that great, so we were doing other stuff, and that was a way of us feeling we weren't completely wasting our time in the meeting and we were getting through it. So what was happening? Well, when I stood back from all of this, I felt there was a vicious circle that was happening. So, which started with no reaction. So people speak and they get no reaction. They get nothing back from anybody else. So they just feel it's not worth trying. Their brain, their self-talk starts to kick in and they start to think, well, they don't like me, or I haven't said anything worthy, or people aren't listening to me. So why should I bother? When we get a positive reaction, we do get a dopamine kick. We do get a really positive brain reaction. When we get nothing, we actually get what the scientists call fatigue. We actually get brain fatigue. And our brain says this equation isn't working. The reward isn't working for my effort. So I'll stop. And maybe I'll do something else. And I think that what was happening, it isn't worth me contributing. So I'll do other stuff. I'll withdraw a little bit and maybe I'll think about other things, or I'll actually do other things. And because I'm doing that, I'm not giving a reaction to others. They're not getting a reward. We've kind of created this vicious circle where people don't contribute enough. They slightly withdraw, video screens go off, and it's just not a great meeting. We get through the meeting, we get to the end of the meeting, but did we really achieve what we could have done if as a team we'd all properly committed? And did we really bond with our peers? Did we do things that were positive for our relationships and our well-being? Or did we do things that, if we carry on like this, will be destructive to our individual and team relationships? And I felt very much that this wasn't the great way things were going. So what could we do about it? Well, I felt we needed to do something new. We'd all sort of fallen into Zoom meetings doing exactly the same things as we did in face-to-face meetings, but they were clearly very different. It wasn't possible to all speak at once. It was difficult to know when it was your go. But at exactly the same time as this was happening, I was involved in a number of situations where we were using other ways to communicate other than the spoken word. One of them was I was helping set up some lifeguarding on a beach near where I live in Cornwall before the RNLI came on board. And we were just using hand signals to train lifeguards. And they were really effective. So this signal means I want to speak. It means you're attracting attention. But in Zoom call, this means I want to speak. I want to go next. Please, will you pass the conversation to me? I also was in a men's mentoring group where we do provide mentoring to young men in crisis, but we also mentor each other and we share stuff. We sit in a circle and we talk to each other, sometimes talking about stuff that's difficult for anybody to share, difficult for men to share. And we use some hand signals there. We use the hand signal that says me too. So I share that with you. I've had a similar experience. And also I hear what you're saying and I'm sending you some kind thoughts or some empathy. And they're really powerful. I found that in the circle with Band of Brothers, I was able to communicate with other people who are very different from me in a way that was much better really than I could have done with words. We all knew what that signal meant. We liked receiving that signal. It's actually quite nice to give it, and you could connect with another man in a very meaningful way. And in fact, you could all speak at once without interrupting. And I thought, well, why don't we try this in Zoom calls? And the third thing was I had some friends who were using baby signing. And again, it did make me think this has got some parallels really with Zoom meetings. We're not able to speak, but we could communicate and connect with each other in a very powerful way using hand signals. So, and then I looked into signaling and found that it is common across all children, and it's common with chimpanzees and various other species that signaling is used, and it's very often the same common set of signals that are used as well. But then we kind of grow out of using them. So why not try it again? Why not reintroduce them? Now we're in an environment where maybe we need them. Maybe we haven't need them. Maybe they work now. So I came up with a series of hand signals, just a few to start with. And then I developed, in fact, there are over 30 altogether, but I have tended to find that 6 to 12 are all you really need to make a big difference to your meetings. Some of them we talked about. This just means I like what you're saying. I hear you. I'm still here. I'm interested. This means I want to speak. If you were to wave and then go like this, or to just go like this, that means you want to speak next because you've got a question. This means you want to speak next because you want to build on the point that I've just made. And this means you want to speak next because you'd like to introduce a different perspective or some new data. So it might be that we've agreed in our team that it's good to challenge, it's good to have diverse views, and I might choose you to go next if I'm speaking, because we've all been saying the same stuff and it would be really good to hear a different opinion. But you would have signaled that to me. You wouldn't have to interrupt, you wouldn't have to butt in. I would know that you wanted to go next, and that was the kind of contribution you wanted to make. And that would be you're on mute. Very people like that one. So again, it just overcomes that. Very often that happens. People want to speak, they're on mute. If you see 4 or 5 people leaning in with their hands to their ear, you know without them having to speak that you're on mute. So I just tried this. I just, back in August, I worked with a team. We got together, we didn't know each other very well. We just did some sharing and it was really powerful. Everyone at the end really bonded. We talked about emotions and we really got to know each other very, very quickly on a Zoom call, and the feedback was tremendous. And I just thought I need to do more of this. I need to try this with some work teams. And I tried it with work teams. And again, it worked really, really quickly. It was possible with a relatively low time intervention to make a big impact on team productivity and engagement. I did have to introduce one other concept, which was the idea of passing. So the signals are very good, but how did I overcome the issue of who wants to go next? And I also realized that it was good for the team to agree some new rules, if you like, some rules of engagement. And the passing just requires a few rules. One of them is that the team need to commit that the meeting is a team effort. So we're in this together and we will all stay present in the meeting and we'll all really try. So rather than all turn up to a meeting and not really pay attention and multitask, we'll all turn up and maybe we'll try and make the meeting last less time. So instead of having an hour's worth of a suboptimal meeting, we'll try and have a really good meeting that lasts 45 minutes where we all stay engaged. And the second part of that is that when I'm speaking, I can't just stop. That would be akin to me being in a team that had turned up to a relay and I've run my leg and I haven't let go of the baton. I'm hanging on to it. So I have to pass the baton. The conversation is a baton. I have to pass it to the next person and I'll know who that person is because they'll look ready and then they'll signal the readiness with a wave and possibly another signal to let me know the kind of contribution that they would like to make. And the third part is that people do need to want to receive the conversation. So they need to stay present themselves, they need to stay attentive, and people need to make a signal. And ideally, you know, what if we agree this as a team, it's good to give people some options. There should be at least one person ready to go next, but ideally there's 2 or 3. And then I've got a choice. I can choose who do I invite in next. And my first thought should be inclusivity. I should invite somebody who hasn't spoken next. And then it's up to me. I could invite in someone who's got a question because maybe that will help them get more involved, or I could invite in a build or a new contribution. But it just helps the conversation flow and takes the pressure off the team lead as well. So it's no longer the responsibility of the team leader to make sure they have to intervene after everyone speaks and nominate who goes next. It's much more of a shared responsibility to make the meeting work. So the signals were really important. I did find that, but I needed these added behaviors. So the video meeting values and behaviors that a team also sign up to. So things like we will be present and interested in a meeting. We will see it as a team responsibility for the meeting to go well. We will have a value of inclusivity and we will make sure that people do get a chance to speak. So the quieter ones are also involved and the conversation isn't dominated by just a few people. And also some skills. We'll recognize we need some new skills to make these team meetings work. It is different. Zoom is different. We need to learn some new skills. They're not necessarily that complicated, but we need to learn them. And the team leader also has to think about their skill set in running meetings. I think it's very complicated running a meeting anyway, and it's an underrated skill, but on an online meeting for an hour or more really requires some good agenda setting and planning skills. For me, running a meeting is more like designing or writing a script for a play and thinking through the structure and the pace and the flow. And a meeting isn't just one meeting. A meeting is often a series of sub-meetings, all of which have a different purpose and should be run in a different way. And I need to think about who should be. I don't have to be the lead actor in every act in my meeting. I could involve other people and they could take responsibility for parts of the meetings. But for them to do that, I need to give them early warning, and I need to think through their role, and I need to give them a chance to get ready for that part of the meeting, which all requires advanced planning. So I can't just turn up to a meeting having not thought about the agenda or just having jotted down 3 headings and then expect it miraculously to work really well. I need to plan in advance and let people know. So the important skill set for team leaders. Some team leaders do that really, really well, and they don't need any help because they were doing that before we went online. Other team leaders haven't got that skill set or haven't got it yet. And you realize when you talk to the team that if they also did a bit of work on their skills, it would further add to the success of the meeting. Okay, so what happens when you start to use hand signals and you get some agreement on some values and behaviors? Well, people do get a reaction. They now speak and they get something back. They see people being present, they see people contributing, and several people can contribute at once. So I'm speaking and I'm just getting some feedback, and that makes me feel good. I now feel I'm getting that positive dopamine kick. It's worth me, what I'm saying maybe is valued by my colleagues. Maybe I should contribute more. Maybe I should stay with this meeting. Maybe I should stay attentive. Maybe I should contribute. And even if my contribution is merely showing others that I'm also interested, that I share the same view, that I am listening to them. And if I do that, surprise, surprise, they'll also feel good and others will contribute. And we'll all leave our videos on and we'll have a better conversation with less reliance on the team leader. And that is exactly what I've found has happened. So in working with teams, once they've adopted the hand signals, they've had an open discussion about behaviors and how they want their meetings to work. And they've invested a bit of time in skills, that their meetings have been quite transformed. And I've got some fantastic testimonies from clients ranging from the likes of Vodafone and LexisNexis through to charities and groups of students, to say that their meetings are really very different when they've taken this different approach. So I knew it was working. So my background is as a management consultant. I've worked for over 30 years with over 200 different organizations. I'm always working with teams, and I've tended to go straight in and implement stuff that I think might work and then try it in the field. But I'm also an honorary research fellow at UCL. And I started to get interested in the science behind it. And I started to absorb and gorge on articles that were related to this and the science around this, and just see what was underpinning what I was finding was actually happening. And there is a lot of research, brain research, to show that things do happen in our brain when we don't get a reaction from others. We're kind of wired to want that reaction, and it does release a positive chemical reaction in our brains that keeps us interested, keeps us engaged, and also helps us connect with others. And if we don't get that, then we get the reverse. We actually get fatigue. Fatigue does kick in, and our brain says, this isn't working for me. I'm not getting the reward that makes it worth putting in the effort. So I need to do something else. I need to withdraw. I need to do less, or I need to do a parallel activity that makes the reward cost balance work for me. And that's really does help explain some of the behaviors we've had in meetings. I then read a lot around conversation theory and meeting theory. And there's some really interesting stuff that talks about preconditions required for an effective conversation to take place. And this was written well before we all went online. But then when you look at online meetings, you realize that about 5 of these preconditions aren't present during online meetings. And they're things like that you can communicate simultaneously, and that you can detect and interpret body language from other people. And we know that those things can't happen on Zoom. We also know, when you look at roles in a conversation, that for a conversation to work well, you need to choose to be a participant or an active participant. And that there are some roles that don't aid a conversation. And they are if you choose to be a bystander or you choose to be an observer. And they tend not to happen very much in face-to-face meetings. In face-to-face meetings, once we've agreed we're going to go to the meeting, we tend to cast ourselves as a participant and we play, we turn up and we contribute. Sometimes we don't. Some people do go into their own world or go onto their phones, but generally speaking, people contribute and stay focused in a face-to-face meeting. But that's very different online. It does seem to me that we've allowed it to be okay to go to an online meeting and then to not really be present, to actually say to ourselves, perhaps subconsciously, I'm going to play the role here of a bystander or an observer. I'm not really going to see it as my responsibility to be in this meeting. And actually that's going to be okay because other people are doing it too. And it happens in lots of meetings and it's actually okay to do that. I can let others carry this meeting and I can dip in and out and cherry pick when I want to stay focused. And in lots of meetings, that seems to have become acceptable. So we kind of together, we get through the meeting. None of us really love it. It isn't a brilliant meeting, but we get through it and we're happy that we've made a contribution that feels okay for us. And I just don't know if that is okay. So my challenge would be, is that really how we want our meetings to be? What if we all just said the only acceptable role in our meetings is an active participant? We're going to turn up, we're going to commit to the meeting like a team committing to an event, and we're going to make the meeting work really well. We're going to make good decisions, we're going to input, they're going to be creative, they're going to be innovative, and we're going to get the meeting done in 25% less time. Is that achievable? Have we got enough talent in our team that we could pull that off if we all tried? And my belief is that pretty much every team can do that if they choose to do that and they adopt some new practices and some new skills. We don't have to take meetings as they are. They don't have to be suboptimal. The other interesting thing I found from conversation theory is this concept of my turn, your turn, which is really important. It's kind of embedded in our psyche that when we have a conversation with somebody, we will have a go and then they will have a go. And sometimes their go doesn't have to be speaking. Their go could be what they call the back channel. So it could just be other people, the person I'm speaking with going, yeah, aha, yeah, okay. And that's important because I feel that person is saying to me, I'm still with you. I hear what you're saying, it's your go again. They're passing back to me. But we don't have that back channel on Zoom. It's very difficult. You can't make those kind of noises or interventions. We're generally on mute. And you know that if you do something like that or you laugh, then you steal the conversation away from who's ever speaking. So we don't have that back channel. And it can be very confusing then if you're speaking and you're getting just a very blank face and a static body and no reaction. And the whole construct of my turn, your turn that we've learned is really important to conversations has just disappeared. And again, another reason why fatigue can kick in and it can cause us to want to withdraw and not participate in the way that we used to. So the hand signals are very good for that because they do allow you to make a back channel work, even if it's as simple as a thumbs up. So I read loads and loads of articles. I was getting very interested in what might be the academic story behind what I found was working in the field. But I also started to speak to some academics and I got very lucky and I spoke to some fantastic psychologists at UCL, who, as many of you will know, are one of the top world universities. And I've got the biggest psychology department in the UK by about a factor of 3. And they were some experimental psychologists who were very interested in what I was doing because it tied in with some work they were also doing anyway. And they wanted to put it to the test. So very quickly, we constructed a randomized controlled trial using groups of students. Now, I was very committed to wanting to try and get this approach in with students because one of my children is a student, my nephew's a student, and they're not having a great time in lots of their seminars. One of them said to me, I'm very frustrated. I'm doing an arts degree. I feel a lot of the value from my degree is the discussion and debate from my peer group, and lots of people turn their video off and they don't really contribute, and my lecturer doesn't do anything about it. And they felt that wasn't really good enough, and they could see the hand signals working in the work I was doing and just thought, well, we could be doing that. Why aren't we doing that? Why isn't my lecturer getting people to put their videos on and getting them to use hand signals so we can all contribute? So I was very keen to do this with UCL. And we had one group where we taught them hand signals, one group where we didn't. And we ran then 3 seminars, or they had the 3 seminars that were coming up in their diaries. And it was amazing. It took a little bit of persuading with the groups, some of them in particular, to get them to put their videos on. But they realized that because we were using hand signals, they were getting some feedback, and that feedback felt good to them. And they started to really want that from their peers, and they started to also share as well. So they hadn't really got to know their colleagues. They've been the whole year just meeting over video, and they started to share some stories of their experiences of lockdown. They started to use Me Too. They started to send each other support, and it was very, very powerful. It really, really, really worked, and the results came through. So the results from surveys and the results from video analysis showed that we made a big impact. And the professors were also very keen that we should do more here. So we're now going to embark on some further studies, trying to take this out into the field. So actually, one of my requests to all of you here today is that if you want to be involved in some of this research in some way, then please do get in touch. We're looking for organizations of all shapes and sizes and sectors that want to try out some of these techniques, and also work with us on hybrid meetings. We're very keen now to delve further into hybrid meetings, where maybe you've got a number of people in a room, a number of people not in a room, and work out the best way to make those meetings highly effective as well. Okay, so I now just want to talk to you a little bit more about the values and behaviors. I've mentioned those, and I realized that they were an important underpinning component here. The hand signals were good, but they worked best where the team had a discussion around how they wanted their meetings to work and had signed up to some common values and behaviors. And I also found it was helpful for me to suggest them. If we start with a completely blank sheet of paper, it takes quite a long time for a team to come to agreement on values. By talking to lots of teams, it seemed that there were some common issues. So I packaged them together in a set of values that I now suggest to teams and say, well, look, what about these? You know, if you don't like them, you can cross them out, you can write your own in, but how about this as a starter for 10? Would this be a sensible set of behaviors for you to discuss and perhaps sign up to as your team behaviors or team rules or team charter for online meetings? And the first one is tech ready. So for many teams, base one is even just making sure that they have got the right technology and they can use it and they can seen and be heard. So let's just make that a value. So if we haven't got that, let's talk to our organization and let's commit ourselves to make sure that we know how to use our laptops. If we're using laptops, we know how to use our tablets. We know how to use Zoom well enough that we don't have to start every meeting with a little technology discussion and a bit of frustration with the team members who haven't quite sorted it out yet. Let's just take that off the table so we all turn up to every meeting tech ready. VMS fluent, so video meeting signals. If we're going to use the hand signals, again, let's commit. Let's use them. Let's remind ourselves of them at the beginning of the meeting. Let's use them actively. Let's use them boldly. And let's make sure we can be seen. So let's set our video cameras up so we can see our hands and that we're in an appropriate room with the right kind of level of light that we can actually be seen. So that's kind of gets us to base camp. Now what about being present in meetings? We know multitasking is really easy. How about we all commit to turning up early for meetings and having prepared for the meeting and being present throughout the whole meeting? So concentrating on the meeting and not something else, really giving our energy, giving our commitment, giving our creativity to the meeting and being interested and listening well, and then showing that we're listening. So it can look like I'm not listening even when I really am, but I can do some simple things to show that. I can nod, I can smile, I can do thumbs up, I can wave, I can show I want to speak. And that's really helps. We know from the science that really helps other people. So let's all do it. If I'm doing my hand signals, if I'm being attentive, I'm actually helping others. And then they in turn will help me and we'll be in that virtuous circle rather than the vicious circle. How about well-being? We know that well-being has become a big issue, particularly in lockdown with lots more people working at home. How about we as a team commit to a well-being value? So I will look after my own well-being. I will have a greater awareness of what that means for me, but I'll also look out for the well-being of others. I'll tune in and I'll ask for help when I need it, but I'll also offer help where I can. And as a team, we'll also make sure we talk about ideas, thoughts, and feelings as well. It won't just be factual meetings. We'll try and minimize PowerPoint and screen share and information sharing. We'll actually talk about things and we'll have good discussions as a team. And we'll be aware of how much airtime we're all taking. So our meetings are truly inclusive and we share the time around amongst us. And finally, accountability. That we will commit to these values and just check in as a team. Perhaps we need to check in every month, perhaps every 2 months, but we'll check in and say, well, how well are our meetings going? And are we sticking to the agreed behaviors? I'll hold myself to account, but that means I'm also prepared for others to call me out if I'm not sticking to those values. And I will also speak up if others aren't too. So if someone's consistently not participating, turning their video off, well, we need to talk about it as a team. Lots of the teams I've worked with, there has been frustration amongst the team with each other's behaviors, but it has been unspoken. And it's much better that the team have honest conversations and sign up to some values, which they then can hold themselves to account for. Without that conversation, nobody really knows what the rules of the road are. It's a very, very valuable conversation for a team to have. So just bringing that together, I found that the video meeting signals are one really important component. If you support them with some work on video meeting values and behaviors, that really helps a team take control of their online meetings, and then further support that with some skills building, simple stuff like using the technology, but also passing and learning the hand signals. And perhaps the team leader just checking in on their team skills at managing a meeting and putting together good agendas. Then within a relatively short intervention, maybe just 2 hours, 2 1-hour sessions with the team, you can make a big impact on productivity, engagement, and longer term on well-being, because people will have better work days, more engaging work days. Somebody said to me, my meetings now are more like going to a good party. They said, I actually put a lot more into my meetings, which ought to make me feel more tired, but it is a bit like when I go to a bad party, I actually feel drained at the end of it. I had to put a lot of effort in. I didn't really enjoy it. I had a load of conversations I didn't really like, and I came away drained and unhappy. This is much more like a good party. I have a lot of conversations, a lot of energy. I dance all night, but I come away feeling really energized. And I think that's how good meetings can be. We put a bit more in, but we come out feeling better and stronger. Okay, so actually with that in mind, I now just want to share a video that we made with the WI. So I was working with a WI group and helping them make their meetings better. And it was also about the same time there was a terrible council meeting that went viral on YouTube of how not to do a Zoom meeting. And the women from Lee Green WI wanted to show how they could have great Zoom meetings. And we actually did some fun stuff up front as well, and also used the hand signals. But I would like to just show you this and just to hear from them, their experience of their meetings.
Oh, isn't Zoom boring? And aren't we all zoomed out? So yes, we've got to make it fun. As a WI, we're all volunteers, and it was tricky at first. We needed some help. So we invited Paul Hills along to talk to us and to help us learn some signals to make Zoom meetings more effective, more fun, and just make sure everybody had a chance to chat. We probably haven't had as big a laugh as that for some time.
My 3 words are mouse in kitchen.
The hand signals were fantastic. Having the signals just brings it to life a bit more. It's much more interactive and lively. Or just having a sense of being together is always good fun, and it's been an absolute lifesaver.
If they're telling you something and you've experienced the same, you can show them as you would if you were face to face, if you were next to each other. You can show them that you're understanding. And if you haven't felt the same experience as them, but they're your friend and you want to share some sort of emotion with them, you can do this, and they know how I am. And I just think that's been really valuable while we've all been so separate.
I've been laughing, so I can feel good hormones whizzing around. And what occurred to me, it actually feels really good making yourself be more physically demonstrative. Thank you.
What we found really useful that Paul helped us to do was, once you're speaking, the person who's talking can actually hand the conversation over to one of the other faces on the screen. So if I was sitting here chatting and there's Mary and Jane and Sarah all wanting to talk, I can actually nominate that the speech is going to go over to them and it's their turn to talk. So they'll have attracted my attention by waving, and then I can hand the conversation on to them. Then it means everybody gets a chance to talk.
Okay, I'm going to go for Fizz, Holiday, Happy. Can I see anybody? Oh, Kay. I'm going to pass to Kay.
Okay, I'm going to say holidays without entertainment. Okay, I'm going to pass to June.
Okay, so my 3 words are traffic, COVID, relief.
Really good fun, Paul, and what a great thing to do with such a lovely bunch of friends. So thank you all. I know there are quite a few WIs around the country who haven't tried Zoom yet. There's the technical things you need to know, but there's also just the managing the people side of it. So talk to somebody like Paul and learn some new skills so that you really, really can run your meeting, your members meeting, your committee meeting, and get the most out of it so that everybody comes back. That's the most important thing. Have some fun together.
Got questions on what we've done so far? Oh yeah, I can see Jeff's got a question. Fantastic, Jeff. Do you come off mute? By the way, that means if anyone is on mute, that's the hand signal for you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. See, as I said right at the beginning, we're building a mental health platform to facilitate counsellors and therapists to do their delivery, and in the research we've done there, we've definitely encountered the historic resistance of that set of clinicians to telehealth tools generally, and now an understanding that they have some value because they didn't have a choice for the last year, and now they're transitioning, and we're building the platform for that transition, and we're trying to really innovate in a lot of that area. And one of the clinicians we spoke to was very vexed by the whole management of the session, particularly in a group context. So we're very, without going into details why, we're very focused around group therapy. That's not the only thing we support. So I've actually got 3 related questions to sort of ask, if I can, very quickly, and I'll send them all because your answers might be related. Using a background or background fuzzing facility, that can often undermine the visibility of anything other than the face. So is that a problem? So that's question number 1. 2, how many people in a group is actually effective? So obviously there's the number of people I can see on a screen, but in reality, I was just watching your video, I actually found it hard to keep up with all of the different signs that were going on. So the reality was, what's the real number where this can be done effectively? In other words, is this purely for teams meetings of 4, 5, 6, 7 people? I can see it working, getting to 10, 15, 20, maybe not. And groups tend to go into the early teens. And the third element is that our clients in this context, the people who are being delivered to, would not be in a position as peers to, first of all, learn the process, and that frankly, it'd be too stressful for them to even think about doing that. So I'm intrigued by the idea of maybe if the therapist was taught to use the features with hand signals automatically, and whether or not there was an adoptive value that you looked into, researched, or valued anyway. So Those are my three questions. Thanks.
No, thank you. The blurred screen, you do have, and one of the other things we have to get people to do is set up right. So some people will have their video on so you can only see their head. So we do have to actually say to people, look, you need to set your video so you can see your arms. But we have found that the blurred screen's okay, and that you can still see. Actually, some of you there have got blurred screens now. So if you give me a thumbs up if you've got a blurred screen, then it's still possible to see that. The blurred screens have been good as well, especially for students, because some students were reluctant to have their videos on because they didn't want to show where they were. And that's been really nice that the blurred screen now seems to work on a less expensive laptop, which is nice. So most people seem to have that. The group size, I think if you've got 3 or 4 people on a meeting, it's easier to do the passing and to work out the signals. So that I think it's less important. Although the teams where we've taught it, they just got used to it now, so they still like to use it. But I think for me, anything from about 6 to 15, 6 to 20 or something is a really good size. But you do get better at scanning the team as well, because we've almost learned already that you don't need to look at people or they've got their videos off. And I've learned to scan better now. So let's all do a thumbs up now together. So if you look at the whole screen, you can take it in, and very often people are doing the same signal or a similar signal. So I have found people notice it, but you have to kind of get used to, it's another new behavior. You have to get used to trying to look at all of the other people, and you do have to be in gallery view. So again, I think most people are aware of that now, but sometimes people are in speaker view where the speaker's big. And again, we will say to people, make sure you're in gallery view where you can see everybody and everybody's the same size. So again, I'm not saying it's perfect, but we found it's still quite workable. I did run a session with 300 people, which was a town hall meeting for a company where half were in America, half were in the UK. And it was very much a one-way communication anyway, but they did introduce the signals, and the executive team said it was really nice, because even though they'd had meetings before where after the town hall meeting, they'd all had a subsequent follow-up meeting and said, well, that was terrible. We just didn't seem to get a reaction from everybody. Maybe they don't like it. Maybe they don't like us. Maybe everyone's feeling really down. And they actually quite liked it. And the finance director shared a quite emotional story about what had been, I was doing what's been good in lockdown, what hasn't been good. And he shared some stuff and got some reactions. And he got a hand-to-heart signal from about 300 people. And it was really nice because you could suddenly see everybody connecting, quite amazingly, actually. So I'm not saying it's perfect for that, but it can still be positive. In Japan, and people are really innovating here, a Japanese lecturer has 2 assistant professors who join all of his lectures with over 200 students, and he gets them to pin themselves to the top of his screen so people can see his presentation slide and they can see 4 or 5 people at the top. And he tells one of his assistant lecturers to nod consistently at appropriate points throughout his presentation. And he's found that he delivers a better lecture when his assistant's nodding, even though he knows he's told him to nod. And the students like the lectures more when the people are nodding. And that sounds really weird, doesn't it? But it sort of works. And I think it's back to that thing that we just need to feel people are engaged. And if we don't get any sense of engagement, we worry. And our self-talk says, I'm not very good, I'm not very interesting. They're not listening, they don't like me. So just doing anything to bring that back, however simple, can be good. I'm not sure about your third question though, Jeff. That might be a longer discussion. I'm not sure I fully understand the context. So, but feel free to contact us, or come in again.
Well, so anybody coming into a mental health session, you're not going to have the opportunity, and I certainly wouldn't want to pressure them with the concepts and ideas that you're putting forward. Something new. They don't need to deal with anything new. You've got to actually remove a lot of that away from them. But I can't see any reason why the idea of having the clinicians trained to use them automatically as they go through the conversation and see if they can encourage that. Because part of the thing that you're trying to do with groups is indeed foster the peer connectivity and the peer support. And I can see this kind of dynamic being potentially valuable there. I don't know if there's ever been any research in that area, but that's kind of what I was thinking is rather than training it, it's leading it and facilitating and driving the adoption that way. That's what I was wondering about.
Yeah, so pass back to me. I did my own pass. So I can see that I think you're right, because if let's say you were doing a session with me and I was opening up about some difficult stuff, I think if I knew that if you put your hand to your heart while you were listening and you didn't really want to interrupt me, you were just saying, I hear you, Paul. I hear you, Paul. I can hear that's a difficult thing. Or I send you some kindness. I know that that's quite powerful for people. So I don't think you'd have to make me do it. But if I knew that's what you meant when you did that, even if it was just that one signal, it does help people connect. What's also interesting, having done this quite a lot now, is people do like to receive, particularly that one when they're sharing, they're opening up a bit more, but it's actually a really nice one to give. If you hear somebody who's telling a sadder story and you give them a hand to heart, you feel good as well. It definitely feels nice. And I think it might be worth you trying that out, Jeff. It would be interesting to try it, and maybe we should talk a bit more. I'd love to know how that worked if you did try it. I'm going to pass to Irina, who's got a question.
Yeah, I think it's kind of leading on a little bit from what Jeff was talking about. It's how to introduce the concept of it into a meeting. For example, if there was a fairly formal AGM and you're already sending papers out about the AGM, so to send out the concept of this is how we're going to run it, learn these signals beforehand, doesn't seem to make sense. So it's how to kind of practically put this in place at the top of the meeting that seems to work immediately for everybody to understand we're going to be doing this when we're going to be wanting to be noticed, or this when we're going to be asking a question, this if you've got something challenging to say. How do you do that without having to do all of the kind of send it beforehand type thing?
Okay, so I think it is very tricky if you're not having a team and you're saying, right, we're going to almost have a training session on this. I've only done it a couple of times. I did it with a friend who runs a charity, and she was having a session where they didn't know we would be using hand signals, and they had some academics presenting some results of a clinical trial to a group of people who were emotionally vested in it. And I just had 5 minutes at the beginning of the meeting, and I only introduced really thumbs up. I only introduced those two signals. And that did work okay. In fact, it worked very well, because again, there was a lot of emotional sharing and people really liked it when they used that and they took to it. But I had to keep it really simple and not do any of the other theory, just two hand signals. And I don't think it would have worked as a pre-read. I think it had to be somebody there in the meeting saying, hey, we're going to do this because it could really help the meeting flow. I think it is a skill. I know it's a simple skill, but I think you have to do it by practicing it. So when I did, even in my 5 minutes, I did say to everyone, just so you're all aware of, just say, literally, let's practice it. Can you all give me a thumbs up? Can you all, if I gave, I did an example, I said, a bit like with you here, I'm not feeling very well, and everyone did a hand to heart. And then probably only half the people in the meeting used them. But that was okay. It still was really good. And people were saying thank you. What you often find is people say thank you. So they get a signal, they spot it, and they say, oh, thank you. Or they say, oh, thank you, Kath, or thank you, Robert, because they recognize that person sending them a communication. So it's working because they see it. Ben's got a question, or Ben's going to relay a question.
Hi, yes, there's a question from Susan. A few questions, actually. I'll go through them one by one. So Susan asks, how does this work if you have more than one screen of participants? So that is tricky, which is, to be honest, it doesn't really. Although you can get 49 people on a Zoom screen, it does now go 7 by 7. But I think it's really comes into its own for team meetings of about 6 to 20. Cool. If someone is overlooked after visibly waving, won't they feel worse?
They tend not to be. I do think one of the other things that, again, this is where the practice helps. Some people think this is a signal. So I do have to say to people, it's got to be 2 or 3 seconds. You know, if you do it really quickly, or if that's your wave, you might get missed. So don't be afraid to give a good wave. But you tend to find that someone will notice it. So even if the person speaking hasn't noticed it, if everyone's aware, someone else will come in and say, oh, I don't think you noticed Paul was waving. And people get good at that. I think the other thing, again, once teams get used to it, let's say I'm speaking and I really don't want to stop yet because I was going to make 3 points and I'm only partway through the first one, and Eva's waving frantically, and I'm thinking, oh, blimey, Eva's waving. She's gonna have to wait for another 2.5 minutes because I'm not stopping yet. Then what I will do is quite simply, I will just say, hey, Eva, I can see you want to go next. I just want to make a couple more points, then I'll pass to you. And Eva can put her hand down, but she knows she's been spotted. And teams get quite good at that. So basically, I haven't found that people wave, then it's worse. I found that they wave and they feel they get noticed. Because what's the other alternative? You've got to butt in, which is quite tricky. I passed to Malcolm's got a question, Ben. I'll go to Malcolm next, if that's all right.
Really interesting. We don't use Zoom, we use Microsoft Teams, which has got a lot of icons for putting your hand up, applause, love, and all these type of things, etc. Have you ever used this in a non-Zoom environment in Microsoft Teams? Because they tend to add more and more.
Yeah, and I can do that now. I can do that now. So I'm giving you a thumbs up now, and I'm giving you probably notice my eyes aren't looking at the screen anymore because I'm having to touch my screen. I'm giving you a heart now. So they do work, but they're hidden in the corner. Lots of people don't notice them. I'm having to look down at my computer, and also I haven't moved my arms. So, you know, you can use them. Reaction buttons are an alternative, but my view would be, well, why not use our arms? Why not actually have a bit of movement and make it much more visual? One of the things we're about to test in our next experiment with UCL is exactly that, though. We're going to have 3 groups, a control group, a group using reaction buttons, and a group using hand signals, all doing the same exercise as a randomized controlled trial, just to test exactly what you said, because it does come up quite a lot. And we want to see if people feel more connected if they use hand signals than using buttons. So it's a good point that's been made before. Back to Ben.
So final question from Susan was, how do you prevent passing from becoming cliquey?
Ah, I see. So a bit like I've played in a football team like that where I could never get the ball. Well, then maybe it was more about my skills. I think thank you. I think that just relies on the team having honest conversations as well. It's tended not to happen because it's very noticeable. One of the other rules is you should, if several people are waving, you should always pass to the person who hasn't had a go yet. So if everyone's agreed that, it would be very obvious if you kept missing people out. And then because if we've signed up to this accountability value, that's really a reason for us to check in and again, have an honest conversation. How well are our meetings going? What's working well? What's working better? What's still not working very well? And I think it's all down to the maturity of the team then and the team leader. If it's happening, I'd say it's a sign of it's a bit of a dysfunctional team if that kind of thing's happening, and it's probably a deeper issue. Great. Well, look, I think we might come to, Ben, go on, if you want to say one more thing. Then you're on mute. You're not.
No, my bad. I thought there was another question.
Okay. Okay, well, I think thank you very much for staying. I think Robert might have thanks, Robert, saying thank you. Yeah, and this is my final signal I'll leave you with. This is a handshake or a hug, goodbye, depending on the how well you know your teammates. But thank you very much. Do try them out, and do get in touch if you want to talk further or be involved in some way in the research. And thank you very much for joining us today.